Welcome to G Fun Facts Online. Today, we are going to strip away the gold leaf and the silence that usually surrounds our image of ancient Egypt. When we think of this civilization, we almost instinctively picture the stillness of the desert. We imagine the Great Pyramids rising from the sands of Giza, the silent stare of the Sphinx, or the hushed, candlelit corridors of a temple in Luxor. We think of a land of the dead, preserved in the dry, sterile breath of the Sahara. But there was another Egypt, a loud, pungent, sweaty, and incredibly busy Egypt that lived and breathed in the wet mud of the Nile Delta. This was the engine room of the empire. It was a place not of silence, but of industrial cacophony, filled with the grinding of stone, the roar of kilns, the shouting of merchants, and the overwhelming brine-soaked scent of fish. For centuries, the wet soil of the delta concealed its secrets far better than the dry sands of the south. The high water table and the shifting branches of the Nile swallowed entire cities, erasing the daily lives of the common people, while the stone monuments of the south endured. But the mud is finally beginning to speak. In a groundbreaking revelation that has sent ripples through the archaeological community, a joint mission between the Egyptian Supreme Council of Antiquities and the University of Padua has unearthed a sprawling industrial complex at the site of Kom Wasit, located in the Bahira Governorate, about 50 kilometers southeast of Alexandria. This site dates back over 2,000 years to the late period and the early Ptolemaic era. What archaeologists found here is not a tomb for a king or a temple for a god. They found a factory. They uncovered the workshops where the famous Egyptian blue faience was fired, the vats where the empire's food was processed, and the tools still lying where the workers left them. And, in a poetic twist of fate, layered right on top of this industrial hum, they found the quiet solemnity of a Roman-era cemetery. This episode is a journey into that lost world. We are going to walk through the rooms of this ancient factory, smell the fermenting fish sauce that was the ketchup of the ancient world, watch the artisans craft amulets, and stand over the graves of children buried in wine jars. This is the story of Kom Wasit. To understand this discovery, we first have to understand the landscape. To the untrained eye, the site of Kom Wasit and its sister site Kom al-Ahmer look like nothing more than hills or mounds rising from the flat agricultural fields of the delta. These mounds, or combs, are actually layer cakes of history. They are vertical timelines of human occupation built up over millennia as mud brick houses dissolved and were built over, again and again. The archaeological mission, led by Dr. Christina Mondin of the University of Padua and Mohammed Abdel-Badieh of the Egyptian Antiquities Sector, was working to map the ancient district capital of Metelis. This region was once a thriving hub positioned near the Canopic branch of the Nile, serving as a gateway between the Mediterranean trade routes and the Egyptian interior. The breakthrough came when they found a large, structured building that simply didn't fit the pattern of a domestic house or a religious temple. It was utilitarian, segmented, and dense with debris. As the team brushed away the soil, the layout of a massive industrial complex began to emerge. Unlike the chaotic growth of a village, this building was planned for efficiency. The walls were thick, likely designed to insulate or contain the heat and smells of the processes within. Dr. Mohammed Ismail Khalid, the Secretary General of the Supreme Council of Antiquities, announced this find as a pivot point in understanding the daily life of the Delta. While we have plenty of evidence of how kings lived, we have precious little evidence of how the economy actually functioned on the ground. The Kom Wasit factory fills that void. It shows us the organized, large-scale production of goods, intended not just for local consumption, but likely for export across the Mediterranean. The stratigraphy, or the layers of soil, reveals that these workshops were active primarily during the late period, from the 26th to the 30th dynasties, roughly 664 to 332 BC, and continued into the early Ptolemaic period. This was a time of immense change, as Egypt came under the influence of Persians, Greeks, and eventually Romans. The factory at Kom Wasit was operating at the crossroads of these civilizations. But before we get to the end of the factory's life, let's step inside it at its peak, around 400 BC. If you were to walk into this building back then, the first thing that would hit you would be the heat and the noise. The complex was a hive of multidisciplinary craftsmanship. It wasn't a factory in the modern sense of a single assembly line, but rather a guild house or a conglomerate of workshops operating side by side. The archaeological team identified three main zones of production based on the artifacts and refuse found in each room. There was a fish processing zone, a faience and ceramic zone, and a metal and stone zone. This clustering suggests centralized management. In the ancient world, such complexes were often attached to temples or local governors who controlled the resources. The Temple of Metelis likely owned this factory, receiving raw materials like fish from the Nile, copper from desert mines, and natron from the Wadi Natrun, and turning them into tradable wealth. Let's talk about the smell first. Of all the rooms in the complex, two stand out for their sheer biological density. In these chambers, the excavation team recovered approximately 700 fish bones. This was not a kitchen. This was a processing plant for one of the most valuable commodities in the ancient Mediterranean: salted fish and fish sauce. In a world without refrigeration, preserving protein was a matter of life and death. But the Egyptians, and later the Greeks and Romans, turned preservation into a culinary art. The Nile Delta, with its marshes and river branches, was teeming with fish like tilapia, Nile perch, and catfish. The massive accumulation of bones suggests the production of botargo, which is salted roe, or specific cuts of salted fish. However, the volume also points toward the production of a fish sauce, similar to the Roman garum. The process was visceral. Workers would bring baskets of fresh catch from the nearby canals. The fish were gutted, and while the meat was salted, the entrails were often saved for the highest quality sauces. They were layered in large vats with copious amounts of salt, which drew out the moisture and created a brine. The vats were then left in the sun for months. Enzymes in the fish guts would break down the proteins, liquefying them into a golden brown sauce rich in glutamates. This was pure liquid umami. It was the ketchup of antiquity, used to season everything from boiled vegetables to roasted meats. The fact that this factory existed in the 5th century BC shows that the Egyptians were industrializing this process long before the Roman conquest, likely exporting it to the Greek world. The 700 bones are a testament to volume. This was mass production, linking Kom Wasit to a global network. Adjacent to the fish processing rooms, the atmosphere would have shifted from the organic tang of brine to the acrid, dry heat of kilns. Here, the team discovered the workshops of the faience makers. Faience, known to the Egyptians as chehinet, meaning that which gleams, was the ancient world's first high-tech synthetic material. It wasn't clay. It was a ceramic made of crushed quartz or sand, mixed with lime and natron, and colored with copper minerals to achieve that iconic turquoise blue hue. The mission found numerous faience amulets in various stages of completion. Finding unfinished objects is crucial for archaeology. A finished amulet tells you about religion, but an unfinished one tells you about technology. The amulets produced here included Jijed pillars, representing stability, Ankhs representing life, and Ujjat eyes for protection. These were the mass-market theology of the day. The artisans likely used the efflorescence technique. They would mix the ground quartz and salts into a paste, press it into fired clay molds, and let it dry. As the object dried, the water evaporated, drawing the salts and copper to the surface to form a powdery crust. When placed in the kiln, this crust melted and fused, creating the brilliant, glass-like blue glaze. The discovery of kiln debris and slag indicates the high temperatures achieved here, proving the master craftsmen were chemists as much as they were artists. The factory's versatility is further highlighted by the discovery of workshops dedicated to metalwork and stone carving. One of the most evocative finds was a collection of unfinished limestone statues. We can see the tool marks of the chisel and the guidelines painted in red ochre by the master draftsman to guide the apprentice's hand. These statues suggest that Kom Wasit was producing high-art devotional objects for temples alongside utilitarian goods. The metal workshops, identified by slag and crucibles, would have been manufacturing bronze or iron tools, likely repairing the knives and hooks used in the fish factory next door. This created a self-sustaining industrial ecosystem. But nothing lasts forever. As the political landscape shifted, so did the settlement. By the Roman period, the industrial roar at Kom Wasit had faded. The factory was abandoned, its roofs likely collapsed, and the area was repurposed by the local population for a very different use: a necropolis. The overlay of these two worlds, the hyperactive industrial zone and the silent city of the dead, provides a unique duality to the site. Centuries after the fires of the kilns went cold, the people of the nearby Roman settlement returned to Kom Wasit not to work, but to bury their dead. The archaeological mission uncovered a Roman period necropolis built directly into the ruins of the old industrial complex. The diversity of the burials indicates a stratified society. There were simple pit burials for the poor, placed directly into the earth. There were anthropoid ceramic coffins, made of clay and roughly shaped like a human, often featuring stylized faces staring up at the sky. But the most poignant discoveries were the amphora burials. The team found burials of children and infants inside large amphorae. In the Roman world, the amphora was the standard shipping container used for wine, oil, or fish sauce. When these jars broke or served their purpose, they were often repurposed as coffins for the very young. This ritual, sometimes called empatmos, was not an act of disrespect. It was an act of protection. The womb-like shape of the amphora was thought to symbolize a return to the earth, a second womb, for the child who left the world too soon. Parents would carefully crack the side of the jar to widen the opening, slide the linen-wrapped body inside, and then place the shards back over the opening like a puzzle, sealing it with mud or plaster. In one of these burials, or perhaps near them in a female grave, The team found a pair of gold earrings. They were delicate and finely crafted, belonging to a young girl. Gold was rare and expensive. For a family to bury such wealth with a child suggests that, despite the industrial nature of the area, there was significant wealth here, and a deep desire to send their daughter into the afterlife with her most precious possessions. The mission didn't just recover artifacts, they recovered the people themselves. The skeletal remains of 23 individuals were excavated. Preliminary bioarchaeological analysis suggests that these people were in relatively good health. There were no signs of violent trauma, suggesting a period of peace, and no severe signs of malnutrition. This makes sense, as they were living in the breadbasket of Egypt with ample access to grain and fish protein. The findings at Kom Wasit also shatter the idea that inland delta villages were isolated. The presence of imported Greek pottery dating back to the 5th century BC, before Alexander the Great, proves that trade networks were robust. Greek merchants were likely sailing down the Canopic branch of the Nile, bringing wine and olive oil to exchange for the salted fish and faience amulets produced at this very factory. The excavation at Kom Wasit is a resurrection of the mundane, which is often the most magical part of history. We see the sweat of the fish salters, the focus of the faience makers, and the grief of the parents burying a child in a jar. This discovery reminds us that the Nile Delta is the final frontier of Egyptian archaeology. Beneath the wet fields, entire cities are waiting to tell their stories. The factory at Kom Wasit was once a loud, smelly, vital engine of the Egyptian economy. Today, it is silent. But thanks to this mission, its story is finally being told. This has been Fun Facts Online. Thank you for listening.